welcome to the Mental Toughness Minute. This is where I take one of the little brief articles that I write in my monthly newsletter and just expand on it a little bit further. So the article should only take you a minute to read. Just have to dial in for a couple more minutes to hear me talk about the particular topic in a bit more detail. For this video, we're actually having a look at a key area that I hear from in all sorts of domains. Doesn't matter who I'm working with. It's really about at that moment when things start to get tough for you, it starts to feel uncomfortable, there starts to be some discomfort with what's going on, and your mind's telling you to stop or you don't need to do it anymore. How do you enable yourself to persist and to keep going? So this is really one of those times when the best thing for you to do is to keep going, but you're fighting those conversations in your head that tell you that you want to stop. So there's quite a lot of things that you can do, but I thought we'd focus on three key things that I find really helpful for the people that I work with. And in a nutshell, one of the things that you can do is to shrink the focus. What do we mean by that? What we mean is that sometimes we can say to ourselves things like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this week, or this term is feeling particularly long. This gym session, it feels like it's going on forever, or, how will I ever get to the end of the year? So when we look at the entirety that we're working on a project, we're engaging in a fitness activity, we're doing a task, whatever it might be, it just feels like it's going on for too long. So one of the easiest ways to move yourself through is, rather than think about the entire duration, how can you shorten it down a little bit? So if you're at the gym, it's not thinking about getting through the whole session. It might be getting through the next set, and in particular, it might be getting through the next 10 reps that you're going to do. And then even when you're doing the 10 reps, breaking those down. I know I have a little mind hack that I always do when I'm in the gym. If I'm doing, say, 10 reps of something, is I count up to 6 and then I count backwards after that, because then there's only 4 left. So how can you shrink the focus, make it seem more manageable? Because the reality is that whilst doing something for 60 minutes might feel like a really long time, most of us would agree that we can do something for 1 minute. And then it's just a question of, how do we do 60 of those? So breaking those things down and shrinking the focus is a really helpful way to help you to persist through. The other thing that can be really helpful is to reconnect with your why. What does that mean? So essentially, when it comes to the things that we do, we can break it down. We can look at it from 3 different angles. It might be about what we're doing. Let's stick with the gym. So what we're doing is we're going into the gym and we're doing an upper body day is what we're doing. So working on weights to do with the upper body, that is what we are doing. What we might ask ourselves is, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Because doing this gym session will help me to be stronger. And I know that everything is easier when I'm stronger. So being able to differentiate the what from the why sometimes helps us to persist when we think to ourselves, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this next set. Now, obviously in the gym, you always want to be listening to your body. But if it's simply a case of helping yourself to push through, that can be helpful. I mentioned there's 3 angles. So we often know what we're doing. What I'm doing is I'm doing this set in the gym. What I'm doing is I'm working on the financials in my business, preparing for my tax return. What I'm doing is I'm cleaning my machinery or I'm cleaning my weapon, getting ready for an activity, whatever that might be. So there's the what we do. There's the why we do it, which is often part of the motivating factor. But the other thing I'd encourage you to think about is how we do things. Because how we do things, sometimes that's where our secret sauce is in terms of what makes us good at the things that we do. It's not just what we do and why we do it. How we do it sometimes makes quite a bit of a difference. So for me at the gym, I found that I wasn't training as well as I knew that I could. And in fact, the clincher was, I walked into a coffee shop, ran into someone I knew. I'd just come from the gym and they said, oh, you look like you're about to head to the gym. And that reminded me that I probably wasn't working as hard as I could be through my gym program, which was totally true. So what I did was I actually got an app that does a gym program. It works well for me because I do quite a bit of travel. So it means that there's no excuse for me not to have my program ready to go. So what I do is weights. Why I do it is for my mental health, for my strength, makes everything easier. But how do I do it? I use an app. You might use a trainer. You might know your own program. But those 3 elements are important. So helping us to persist through when things are tough, sometimes reconnecting with why am I doing this activity and mindfully telling ourselves that before we start the activity can sometimes be something that helps us to push through the duration. I'm working with a lot of athletes at the moment who are in pre-season. And pre-season always feels tougher than season because they're often not playing their sport, they're preparing for it. So why am I doing this particular session? Can sometimes be a really great question to ask yourself to help you to push through, particularly when it's starting to feel tough. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is the importance of protecting your recovery. So we know that in all of the domains of our life, the recovery is just as important as the work. If we want to be able to work effectively, if we want to be able to work for the long term, then what we need to do is we need to build good recovery into our work, whatever that might be. So again, stick with the gym example, that might be making sure that you have days when you are not doing training, or you're alternating your training, or you're doing an active recovery, or you're getting in the pool, unless you're a swimmer, in which case that's where all the hard work is done. So making sure you have recovery into your physical training, making sure you have a recovery from the general work that you're doing as well. So I know that I like to plan the tasks of my week where I can, so that I have the ebbs and the flows, the high intensity work, and then maybe there's some tasks I can do that I can put some music on and listen to it, and it can be active recovery. And then knowing when it is that I need to shut down the computer or stop the conversations and go and look after myself. So we know that when we prioritize our recovery and recognize it as an important part of our work, then it sets us up to do better within the work that we do. So hopefully those three things help you to think about how you can persist when it does get tough. How can you make the thinking about the tasks smaller, segment it, break it down into smaller chunks, remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing, and then looking after yourself and allowing some adequate time for you in terms of your recovery. Would love to stay in contact with you. So lots of ways, if you like this tip or want to get any more of my access to my resources, or send me an email about a book that you're reading that you're really enjoying. I always love to get good book referrals, or if you've got a question for me, or perhaps you even want to chat to me about speaking at one of your events. So lots of ways you can stay in contact depending on what works best for you. So you can receive the Locker Room, which is my monthly newsletter, direct to your inbox. You could do that by just jumping onto the website. There's a subscribe button that sits there, and that will send you through a couple of little resources. I think it gives you the first chapter of my audio book to the Elite as just a little thank you for subscribing, and then you'll get that newsletter once a month. If you jump onto my website, there's lots of different resources and things there. You can see some of the things that I do, and if you've got any questions about any of those, happy to answer those for you. If you want to listen to some of the podcast episodes that I have a weekly episode on the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Commission. So there's about 260 articles there, stories of interviews that we've done over the years. And then, of course, I've got a series of books that I've written as well. So there'll be something there potentially that will be of interest for you. So if you've got any questions for the minute, Mindset Minute, then please let me know. But otherwise, I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.